What's up YouTube, this is Tube Digger. In this video I'm going to show you how to emulate the old Timestretch algorithm found in Akai S-series samplers back in the day. Now the reason I'm doing this video is I've had a number of requests from guys asking, can you emulate the old jungle style Timestretch sound found in the old S-series vintage samplers? So yes, it can be done. It's a workaround and it's somewhat similar, but it doesn't use warping or the Timestretch algorithm in the dedicated sampler of the MPC Live or MPCX. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to navigate to my SD card and I'm going to get this speech sample called Big Up All the Massive and Crew.
Big up all the massive and crew.
Let's go to my sample editor.
Big up all the massive and crew.
So there's our sample, Big Up All the Massive and Crew. I'm just going to normalize it, it's a little bit quiet.
Big up all the massive and crew.
So there's our original sample. I'm just going to crop it as well because there's some dead air at the end of that. Or discard rather. So there you go. So first of all, let's take a look at the Timestretch algorithm in the sampler. If I can find it, there you go, Timestretch. So it's a little bit bright. Let's actually take the, there you go. So you can see the ratio field here. So I'm going to take the ratio down to 50% of this sample's original tempo. The MPC Live has calculated it at 285. That's obviously kind of irrelevant, but this is going to be 50% of its original speed. So let's now do that and let's take a listen.
Big up all the massive and crew.
Now, okay, I've time stretched it to 50%, but even if I was to do it again, another 50% of its original speed.
Big up all the massive and crew.
Now it's kind of similar, but you might have seen my other, I've just noticed actually it's called Big Up All the Assive. The Assive and Crew, great. But anyway, yeah, this algorithm is really great for taking a tiny section of any given sample and stretching it out into a really nice, glistening, smooth drone. So it's a bit too clean to emulate that old S-series sampler Timestretch sound. So we can't use that. So I'm going to undo this.
Big up all
So just a point to mention on that, you don't get multiple undos with the processes in here, or at least I'm not too sure with the other processes or the other functions, but I've tried to undo that first Timestretch and I can't. So I'm going to load in that sample again. The sample exists, replace, there you go. So now let's go to the program editor and listen to what warping does. In fact, let's go back to the sample editor and discard the bits we don't want again. I'm going fast on this, guys, because I imagine those who are watching this will be up to speed with how all this stuff is done. If not, I do apologise. Please put any questions or comments down below. But I'm going to assume that you know pretty much what you're doing. This is an advanced technique, I would assume, for some people. But anyway, there you go. There's our new cropped sample. So let's take that into, oh, it's already in our program. So let's now put the warp on there, and I'm going to change the stretch percentage to 400%. And now let's take a listen. Okay, so that has sped it up. Now it's because the BPM's being calculated as 20 there. So let's.
Big up all the massive and crew.
Could actually take BPM sync off there.
Big up all the
Okay, so again, not great. I'm not a massive fan of this anyway. I've said it many times in my other videos. I don't like the warp function. I've never used it for a track that I've made, as far as I can remember. It doesn't serve any decent purpose for me in its current state. I think it makes things sound very unnatural and not in a good way. It doesn't emulate that old jungle style Timestretch algorithm sound. and it's less clean than the one found in a dedicated sampler. So let's go back to the sample editor. I'm going to go into chop mode, and now I'm going to use the chopping to emulate it. So back in the day, S-series samplers basically added a small looping portion throughout the sample. They would basically duplicate little sections of the wave cycles. So it would essentially be duplicating or copying tiny little portions and then adding them, therefore pushing the sample out and stretching it out to a larger length. So that's basically what we're going to emulate using the chop feature of the MPC Live. So let's go to regions, double tap on regions. I'm going to choose 64, that should be enough. Let's now zoom back out, and there you go. We've got loads of individual regions now. Now I'm going to press and hold shift and convert this to a non-destructive program so we don't get loads of additional samples created. So non-destructive slice. I'm going to create events because that way I won't have to individually or manually put in all those 64 chops into the sequencer. And I'm going to choose those events to go over 4 bars. So do it. Now, as you may know, the default bar length is 2, so I'm going to increase that to 4. Now I'm going to play back, and it's going to sound choppy and staccato. Okay, so that's not what we want. But if we go to the program editor, now what we need to do is go to the edit zones window. I'm going to choose all, close that. I'm going to change in the LFO modulation page the sample playback mode to note on so we can loop those samples. So this is the emulation of the actual duplicating of those little sections that I showed you in the sample editor that the old S-series samplers basically did. Now the only difference with that is, of course, we can loop these individual samples now, but we can't really loop the individual portion of those chops without having to do every single one of them manually, which is going to be a hell of a ball ache. Now, I'll show you what I mean about that in a minute. Now, let's listen back, and this will sound a lot closer to that old school Timestretch vibe. Not too bad, it's getting closer. We can change the loop type. At the moment, it's set to forward. Let's change it to ping pong. So that's not as good as forward. Let's now change it to reverse. It's probably going to be the same or similar to ping pong. Okay, not too bad, but I think the forward loop was the best. Now, going back to the loop points in all these chops. Now I'm going to choose one at random. So slice 11, I'm going to take it out of all mode. Actually, I'm going to keep it in all mode to show you what I mean. Now I've tried this. If you go to the gear or the cog symbol up here, you can set loop lock to off. Okay, so I'm going to do that now, but I'm not going to adjust this because I've tried it and it didn't work. So as you can see, there's our loop point and it's at the start point of each of our chops, right? Now, if I move that loop point, that doesn't get reflected over all the other chops, even though I'm in edit all zones mode. I don't know why, maybe it's just a safety feature, but if I was to edit the start or the end points, that would also not be reflected across all the pads. I'm not going to do it, otherwise I'm just going to have to abandon the video because I've tried it before and it breaks the looping for some reason. It actually stops you from actually being able to loop and things just play staccato like they did when I first made this sequence from our chop program. If you want to try it yourselves, you're going to have to put it to current edit zones mode and then go through every one of your 64 chops and move that up to there. So now your chop will be like that and it will have a very buzzy end looping portion. I've tried multiple as well and that still breaks it. Doesn't break the machine obviously, it just stops everything from looping for some reason. I don't know whether that's a bug or something, or I've just actually corrupted it by trying to do that. So I think probably the best way to do it then is create maybe 128 chops instead of 64. So I'm going to do that now. Now I'm going to go to chop again, regions, double tap on regions, 128. So loads of regions now. So press and hold shift, convert, non-destructive slice, create events. I'm going to do it over the same amount of bars. So this is a point to mention here. It's going to sound different, obviously, if you spread that out or you create the vents over, you know, a longer amount or a larger amount of bars, or a shorter amount of bars, or lesser amount of bars, should I say. But I've chosen 4 because, I don't know, it's roughly about 5 seconds, and this original sample's about 2 seconds, so I just wanted to stretch it over that time, just using my common sense. So it's down to you guys how you stretch out your samples if you're going to do this technique. So do it. Now I'm going to play back. Got our staccato. Let's go to program edit. I'm going to go to all zones again. Now I'm not going to use the loop lock thing and adjust the sample points, because now we've got a lot shorter portions of these samples anyway. So let's go to LFO modulation, turn note on, samples, and turn the pad loop on, and let's take a listen to that. Actually, I didn't increase my bars to 4. So to my ears, that doesn't sound as good as the 64 chops, and that will tell you that as technology has progressed since back in the days when Akai released the S2000, S3000, etc., maybe even some of the Emu samplers, that time stretch algorithm was probably relying on, you know, lesser resolution duplication of those samples. It kind of proves that in a way. I might be wrong, but to me it seems like because the time stretch algorithm in the MPC Live and MPC X in the current day is a lot higher resolution, and that's why things sound smoother and therefore not authentic, you know, if comparing it to the old S-series samplers or the Emu samplers. So now that I've increased the resolution of the chops, it's basically done the same thing, and that's why it sounds smoother but kind of more metallic and robotic. So I'm just going to try one more thing before I end the video. I'm going to increase my bars to 8, and I'm going to go back to the sample editor. I'm going to create a new chop program. So convert, actually, yeah, that's right. Convert, and I'm going to spread that over 8 bars. So this will create a new chop program. So I must remember now to go back to track 1 and delete my first chop program there, so we don't get doubling up. Now my new chop program that's going to be spread over 8 bars is on track 2. Let's now listen to that over 8 bars. Okay, so that's staccato again. Let's go to program edit, do the same thing with all zones, note on, samples, pad loop. So yeah, again, it doesn't sound great, and I think that's just because it's 128 chops. So if you're going to try this, guys, please, you know, experiment with the amount of chops. It doesn't have to be 64 to fit in line with the amount of steps that you've got in your sequencer. It just needs to be, you know, a relatively high number to give you that kind of buzzy time stretch feel that you're going to get when you set your zones to note on and set your looping activated for your pads. I'm going to do one more thing before I go. I'm going to go to sample edit. I'm going to change my regions again to, let's try 80. Now from memory, 64 is what I tried first, and that didn't sound too bad. I wonder if somewhere in between that and 128 will work, so maybe 80, yeah. Convert again. I'm going to do it over 4 bars again. Create events. Now I'm going to delete or just erase track 2. I'm going to delete the program just so we don't get all mixed up. And now this is our new one with the 80 chops, okay? So again, staccato, let's take that back down to 4 bars. Let's go to program edit, do this all again, note on, and let's set our samples to loop. So somewhat there. I still think maybe the 64 was kind of more accurate to the old sampler algorithm for time stretching. To my ears, the reverse mode of the loop on all these zones sounds a little bit more accurate now. Let's try ping pong again. You can hear some clicks in there as well. Now usually it's the other way round, that reverse mode and ping pong mode sound smoother, but in this case, strangely enough, forward mode kind of eliminates the clicks to my ears. There's definitely less clicks in there. One other thing I'm going to try is just to let you guys hear how it sounds when we adjust the pitch. Now obviously we've emulated time stretching here, so everything's on the grid, so the timing's not going to change even though we've not actually time stretched this. We've emulated time stretching, and it's the same thing that I did in another video where I chopped up an aim and break and showed you that you don't have to time stretch it. You can get it to play back at different pitches at the same tempo or a different tempo to the original sample, and not actually time stretch it or warp it. So it's essentially exactly the same technique. So let's just take a listen at a different pitch. Sounds pretty mental. Anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video and gives you some insight as to how to emulate that old school jungle time stretch sound. You can try it on drums, obviously, it'll work on any sample, but I just wanted to try this kind of classic jungle style ragga dancehall sample just for the reference really. Anyway, please like, share and subscribe. I will see you guys on the next one. This is Tube Digger and I'm out.